Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a good weekend. Are you all ready for the elections coming up soon? and all the fun we get to have between elections and the inauguration. I personally think this could be very, very smooth, but I think unless there's a landslide in either direction, things could get pretty wild. And I think we're seeing the writing on the wall right now. Now, look, we have a great show lined up today. The elections, again, they're in a couple weeks, right? Just a little over 2 weeks. We're already seeing lawsuits rolling in on the many aspects of the process, including mail-in ballots, election certification, voter rolls, challenges to the Electoral College. I'll actually say the Electoral College will probably become one of the biggest focuses if either side wins. Get ready for it. I'll be going through the most important lawsuits for you all because there's a lot happening I want to talk about and what they could mean for the elections. Also, there's a lot of talk surrounding these elections, and there's been a viral article going around. You might have seen it. Politico had some stuff on it. I mean, if you're reading most media, you probably saw this, right? They're talking about the possibility that if one side loses at first, then actually succeeds in overturning the results. Well, it's possible. Now, it's been really viral. I'll show you that today as well. And also, early voting data is already rolling in. And it actually tells pretty competing stories of the potential results. I want to show you who is winning so far, at least based on party affiliation, based on early voting data. Now, I'll be deep diving into all this today. So let's jump into the first story. So, Republicans and Democrats alike, no matter which side you're on, they are both preparing for challenges to the 2024 elections. Now, a lot of them say that they're preparing for the other side to rig it, and they're working against that, but they're actually kind of preparing to, also do their own challenges based on their own interests as well. I'll talk about the details of it. Now, look, with the presidential election again on November 5th, coming up very soon, lawsuits are already coming in, and this is throughout the United States. This includes issues of mail-in ballots, concerns over voting rolls. Let's start by having a look at this. This is AP. It says this: no matter the margins, Republicans and Democrats are preparing for a potentially lengthy battle over the results once they come in. Dozens of lawsuits that could set the stage for challenges after the votes are counted are already playing out in courts across the country. This is important here because what they're saying is the lawsuits right now are not necessarily determining the outcome. The lawsuits right now are setting the stage for the election challenges we will very likely see after November 5th. Now, notes that most have been filed by Republicans and their allies, true in many regards, and notes that many of the cases involve challenges to mail-in balloting, ballots from overseas voters, and claims of voting by people who are not U.S. citizens. It's a bit of nuance there. What they're talking about mostly is cleaning the voter rolls, not necessarily like going after people who've already voted who are not U.S. citizens. I'll get into it. They note that while partisan battles over voting rolls have long been part of presidential campaigns, election litigation, all the lawsuits, has soared in recent years, with money pouring in for legal fights and the number of outside groups involved in election litigation proliferating. The disputes are not likely to slow down anytime soon. And I'd agree with them. We're not watching the end of it, we're watching the beginning of it, right? This is the beginning of what we're probably going to be watching for the next several months. Now look, the story mentions other issues, including that Donald Trump has declined to say whether or not he would accept the election results. To be clear on that, because a lot of them, if you read what's being said in a lot of media, they say that Donald Trump said that he will not accept the results of the election. The real technical statement he made was that he will accept the results, but only if the election is done fairly and honestly. And it's important to note that the Democrats are saying the same thing. It's not just Republicans, right? Democrats are warning of people in key voting positions nationwide. They're saying right now that they may refuse to certify the election results. You have people in office publicly saying this, and they may even file more lawsuits. And look, it's not partisan. On both sides, you see this. Now look, there were reports some Democrats would not commit to certifying the election if Donald Trump wins. There were also Republicans saying that. On the Democrat side, their statements come with the same caveat as the Republicans. They're saying they will accept the results if the elections are free, fair, and honest. And look, that's basically what Trump is saying as well. Both sides are saying they'll accept the results, but it needs to be done fairly and honestly. And the problem you have with that little caveat there is that both sides already believe there are things being done in unfair ways. Democrats are saying, challenging voter access is their big issue. Republicans saying the lack of, let's say, integrity within the election system is their issue. Democrats say that, you were blocking people from voting, that you're challenging registered voters. Republicans are saying you're making the system so open that anybody can vote, although, you need to have legal action to determine whether it's legal or not, and so they're challenging it. That's basically where the argument is. Now, look, the big problem is there are some people, not all, on both sides, again, who already believe things are not being done up to those standards, meaning the stage is set for these challenges. Now, it also seems it's not the majority who are planning to do this, the ones saying that they won't certify. Now, with that said, it's important to look at the details of the challenges. And we can get a sense of what's to come in the debates, over the next few months by looking at some of the lawsuits already coming in. The Epoch Times had a really kind of pretty complete article talking about many of the cases right now. Let me show you what they're saying. They say some of the cases remain ongoing, and if 2024 is anything like 2020, the nation could see a flurry of lawsuits after Election Day, with candidates also challenging the outcomes. It is, however, unclear how far any legal case will go, with experts doubting a Supreme Court case will result from the ongoing slate of legal challenges. It says, here are some of the issues on it, right? Let me show you. This is further in. Mail-in ballots, one of them. It notes that a recent lawsuit in Pennsylvania, one of the more hotly contested states in 2020, dealt with how to process mail-in ballots that lack proper dates and other information. You might remember some of the arguments at the time back in 2020 was that you had these what they call pristine ballots. They looked like they'd just been copied out. There were no marks, no crinkles. They were like pristine. All of them had the same exact circling of the person people were voting for, and people were saying, hey, what's up with these ballots, right? Some of them did not have matching signatures. Some of them, as it notes here, lacked proper dates and other information. And that brought up the issue of how do you certify whether these are valid or not? If the systems that are normally in place to ensure that these votes can be counted are not there, how do you count them? Now, they note a practice known as ballot curing allows voters to correct deficiencies in their ballots after submitting them. And that was one of the big challenges as well, because, what if people check their votes and they say, hey, that's not who I voted for? And also, if there's a problem, an error as the votes are being processed, sometimes that process is then adjudicated to the person who's overseeing it, the person working the station. And it's then on them to select the person they believe the person meant to vote for, right? There's a lot of challenges with this. Now remember, a lot of leniency on issues, because, the challenge was this. 2020, we still had lockdowns. 2020, we had the whole COVID-19 pandemic. 2020, there was social distancing. You might remember people doing poll watching were not allowed to get too close to the people processing votes. You had a lot of things that normally do not happen. And because of that, a lot of people said, well, how do I know you're doing this honestly? How do I know this is being done in a fair way? And when you had universal mail-in ballots and large-scale remote voting of that nature, people naturally became very suspicious of it. Now, the important thing with the upcoming election is we no longer have COVID-19. Well, maybe in some places they do. But for the most part, we don't have lockdowns, we don't have mask mandates, we don't have social distancing. And so given the fact that the circumstances that justified the types of actions that took place in 2020 are no longer there, we could actually see things being done very differently. The challenge is that some of the standards and laws that were put in place for that condition have stayed in place. And so that's going to become one of the big areas of legal challenges. Now, on the note of certification, how do you certify these votes, right? It notes that Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney heard arguments on October 1st over Democrats' challenge to Georgia's state election board policies surrounding certification. One of the rules requires officials to make a reasonable inquiry before certifying the results, while another allows officials to review documentation, quote, created during the conduct of elections. I should be clear, this legal case is ongoing, and personally I think the challenges you'll see with this are not going to end on Election Day. This case ties into challenges to certify an election. And what's interesting is this. A lot of the court cases we're seeing, they're being challenged and overturned at the lower levels. And many people would question, well, why are they doing it so late? Why are they doing this so close to the election? Well, there's a couple different ways you could say this, right? On one side, you could say, well, they probably waited too long and they want to clean voter rolls, which we'll get into in a moment, and they want to do this and that. The other side is, well, maybe they want the legal cases to be able to go to higher court post-election. See what I mean? In other words, what we're going to be watching initially over the next couple weeks leading up to the elections and over the past few weeks is that we have seen many lawsuits filed. Many of the lawsuits are being challenged in lower courts. What happens? Well, they don't just go away. Individuals making the lawsuits appeal them. They then go to higher courts. And what's going to happen? Well, the election is going to take place, and those existing lawsuits will remain in place. And those existing lawsuits are going to slowly go up through the different levels of our legal system. And very likely we will see that after the election, if people believe the issues they raised prior to the election are in fact problematic, if they believe these things might have contributed to the elections being done in a way they don't agree with, well, that is going to give some additional fire, beneath these different lawsuits. And what you're going to watch then is legal challenges currently in place rather than, retroactively in place. They're putting this in place beforehand rather than after. And the importance of that is that, remember in 2020 what happened. 2020, again, the Trump team noted a lot of issues they had with the elections. They filed their lawsuits after the elections. They had to very rapidly try to make their cases in a very short time frame, between November 5th and January 6th, right? The counting of Electoral College votes. And because it was done so rapidly, there were a lot of errors. They were getting fed false leads, and it was problematic. If the process is already there, noting the known issues that exist, then you will see the lawsuits joining the results, right? And then feeding into, again, the challenges we're going to see after the elections. Now, another big one's going to be the voter rolls. And I think this could actually be one of the bigger issues, especially in some of the swing states. Epoch Times notes the Department of Justice has sued both Alabama and Virginia over their attempts to clean up their state's voter rolls prior to the election. On October 16th, a federal judge in Alabama halted the state's program with a preliminary injunction. And notes that both lawsuits cite something known as the quiet period provision of the National Voter Registration Act, which states, the state shall complete not later than 90 days prior to the date of a primary or general election for federal office any program, the purpose of which is to systematically remove the names of ineligible voters from the official lists of eligible voters. So in other words, you have a law on one side that says you can't do it within 90 days of the election, right? Changing your voter rolls, removing people you might think are ineligible to vote. The other side of it is that a lot of the state officials are saying, well, based on other laws, we're not allowed to certify an election if we believe there are issues, that they need to be legally in charge of the legalities of the election. And if they believe that there's a problem in place, they legally cannot agree to it. They legally cannot accept it. And so you have two different laws. Both are acting within the law, technically, right? But these laws are incompatible. These laws conflict with each other. And based on the fact that the laws conflict with each other, it is very likely, post-election, this is going to become an issue still, and the challenges of it will become things that look at the integrity of votes. At the very least, they might put some pressure on voters, which Democrats are saying is also their problem, right? Because what happens if you have, this is the issue basically. They've made the process of registering to vote easier. Normal safeguards that would prevent a non-U.S. citizen from registering to vote are basically on the individual. Because if you go and apply for a driver's license, it asks you a little prompt on the screen, do you want to register to vote? Are you a U.S. citizen? If an individual wants to be dishonest and say, or they don't understand it, they say, yes, I'm eligible to vote, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, they're registered to vote. And the check on citizenship is just on them. Now the question is, you sometimes have issues of discrepancies between registration within the state and registration at the federal level. And you have some voters who are only registered at the federal level. This is making the states question, well, are these legitimate voters or not? Now, Republicans would say you need to check that. And of course, the federal government does have voter rolls. They actually have the ability to check the citizenship of these voters. The states are requesting a check on the citizenship. The federal government is refusing that because they say based on federal law, you can't wait within 90 days of the election. It's 2 weeks away, and a lot of these were filed within just a few weeks ago. And they're saying that, well, you can't do that. They're saying, well, how can you allow, unverified voters if you check it? What does it matter if you remove them or not if they're not supposed to vote anyway? That is the challenge. And that's likely a challenge we're not going to see go away until after the elections. Now look, it's also likely the Electoral College could become one of the biggest focuses. And if either side wins, that's going to be one of the biggest things we will watch. The Electoral College and the U.S. Constitution defining how states have an equal say at the table, that is going to be one of the core issues, I'll say right now. Now, I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Well, look, the elections are just a couple weeks away, November 5th. And with these just around the corner, both Republicans and Democrats are right now preparing for various challenges on the various aspects of the election. Now, look, right now, lawsuits are already coming in throughout the United States. These include issues of mail-in ballots, concerns over voting rolls, and this is very likely the beginning, not the end of it. And now look, it's also very likely the Electoral College could become a point of focus if either side wins. This is going to be one of the biggest final stages, no matter which side wins the election at first. The Guardian says this: even though the United States remember, they're UK media, right? They say, even though the United States touts its status as one of the world's leading democracies, we're a republic, not a democracy, but regardless, it says its citizens do not get to directly choose the president. The reason for that is we're a constitutional republic, which again is not a direct democracy. A direct democracy would allow citizens to directly choose the president. Representative democracy, or a republic, is the process we have. The UK as well, actually, but theirs is slightly different. Now look, it notes this. They say that task is reserved for the Electoral College. They say the convoluted way in which Americans have selected their president since the 18th century. during the founding of our country. They say in recent years there's been growing criticism of the Electoral College, accelerated by the fact that two Republican presidents, George W. Bush in 2000 and Donald Trump in 2016, have been elected president while losing the popular vote. But there's no sign that U.S. elections will change anytime soon. Now, look, this is the beginning of the debate, not the end of it, as I've mentioned before. This is going to be one of the big narratives you're going to hear for months. Now, look, the Electoral College is in place throughout, through our Constitution. It's something that is written in the document that constitutes our form of government. Now, the reason it's there, basically allowing each state to have a set number of Electoral College votes. The way it works, every state votes, people vote on who's going to be the next president or whatever else at the federal level. That goes to the certain number of key votes, which then go on the points for that state. Now, look, the reason it's there, it was part of the agreement for smaller states if they were going to enter the federalist system, right? Because America is a unique country. We're not like the UK or Germany or France. We're more like if all of Europe was united into a single country, like the EU, for example. And the way it works is this. Imagine if the European Union wanted to have, a federalist system, right, at the country level, not just, all the country level, not just individual states. Well, what would you do? Well, you'd have a lot of countries, the smaller ones, concerned that they would not actually have a say. Like, what would they get out of it? If, for example, let's say like Luxembourg, a very small country, were to join that type of federalist system. And they believed that Germany, one of the biggest countries, would basically override any vote they could possibly have. What incentive would they have to actually join that type of federalist system? Well, they'd say, well, why would I submit to the wills of your country? What do I get out of this? The American states had the same argument. A lot of smaller states, Rhode Island, others, if they were going to enter the federalist system, they wanted to make sure that they would not be dictated by the two, the biggest states out there. Which, now, for example, if we had direct democracy, if we had it so the Electoral College wasn't in place, well, the election would basically be determined by New York and California, and Texas to an extent. You would have the states with the largest populations basically determining the outcome of elections. To make sure that does not happen, we have, of course, the Electoral College written in our Constitution, which means that they're giving a certain number of Electoral College votes per state based to an extent on population. Some argue that mass migration itself has altered that because when you start changing the amount of citizens, then you change the amount of representation they get. Now, the technicality with that as well is that since the Electoral College is part of our Constitution, individuals who challenge the Electoral College are technically challenging the Constitution itself, which is debatable on legality anyway, especially from elected officials. But regardless of that, many people also believe that the voices of the individual within America and the will of the American people are being muffled by it. And that's the other side of it. Now look, this likewise leads to challenges in elections. And it's on both sides, let's be honest with ourselves. Remember, in 2020, Republicans pushed for dueling electors to get two sets of electors on their way to cast their votes to contest the election. Part of that was because you had ongoing legal challenges, and based on the outcome of the legal challenges, they wanted to have an alternate slate of electors in place to vote if the legal challenges swung the other way. Many of them are now facing legal charges themselves because of the way some of the lawsuits and charges worked afterwards. But remember, Democrats also did something very similar. In 2016, right, the previous election, Democrats pushed for faithless electors. And they pushed many members of the Electoral College to switch their votes to Hillary Clinton, even if the state went for Donald Trump. Now look, it's possible we won't see these types of challenges because of the backlash we've seen since then. Let's be honest with ourselves. Some members of the Electoral College were even facing death threats in 2016, and some of the dueling electors from 2020 are right now, as we speak, facing criminal charges, meaning that it might be deemed too dangerous to make those kinds of challenges. But personally, I think that won't happen because the Electoral College tends to be one of the more contentious political issues when one side wants to challenge the outcome of the vote. But look, back to the election challenges, there's also a whole other possibility. There's the possibility that one side loses at first, then actually succeeds in overturning the results. Now, we talked about the challenges to it, and again, the challenges to those challenges, but what happens if the challenges succeed? What happens if it actually works? What happens if one side files lawsuits and makes their whole case and they win, and then the results of the election are flipped? Well, that's actually possible. Politico has a story on this that's been going viral kind of all over the place. Let me show you. Look at this. Politico said this: dozens of interviews with people deeply familiar or involved with the election process point to a clear consensus. Not only could Trump make a second attempt at overturning an election he loses, they say he and his allies are already laying the groundwork for those types of challenges. Now, they say some of the necessary ingredients for this extraordinary campaign are in place. Trump has already embarked, they say, on a clear mission to stoke as much uncertainty as possible about the results of the election. Now, I'd say that both sides have done that. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? In fact, I'd say Politico in this is actually doing what they say the other side is doing, right? They're stoking doubts about the integrity of the process because they're already saying that the other side's going to do it. They're kind of gaslighting each other, right? In other words. Now, the story basically says, though, that Trump's most likely approach will be to use legal challenges to the elections, then work with state officials to appoint dueling electors, like he did in 2020. Now, it also alleges that another path to overturning the election can come through a contingency election. And this would basically get triggered if neither candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College. Now, the idea of a contingency election, this was kind of like the thing people said doesn't exist back in 2020, but it's still there. If that were to happen, here's what it would look like. Each state delegation would get a single vote. And given that Republicans control 26 of the state delegations, well, Democrats only have 22, because remember, we have independents as well, then this could change the outcome of the election. Donald Trump using this method, as they point out, and Politico is right about this, if they were to use the method already kind of in place, it is possible they could overturn the results of the election. Now look, again, with that said, the election technically is already taking place. Technically, although, again, votes technically come in November 5th, people are actually voting already because you have early voting, you have mail-in ballots, and early voting data is already rolling in. It's been telling pretty competing stories. I'll be talking about this, though, only on EpochTV.com. Before we jump, though, I was recently in North Carolina to report on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. It left a scene of devastation. There were some pretty terrible things, but there was also some really incredible stories there. Let me show you this. Now, again, I spoke with many people there. Many of them were displaced. Homes and businesses were destroyed in many regards. My team and I were there for a few days. We went to pretty much all around North Carolina, and we met people who I will say are heroes, people who are uniting to help their community. And this includes people of all walks of life who've come together to lend a hand to their neighbors. Now, you can watch the special feature on EpochTV.com. It's called Heroes of Helene. So those of you joining us on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below or in the live chat. Click on that and join us on EpochTV.com. And not only will you get access to the rest of this episode and my live Q&A where we'll talk about your questions, I'll also get important reports and information to you on issues that really matter, like Hurricane Helene, showing what things look like on the ground in North Carolina with these hurricanes. All right, folks, that said, let's jump over right now, so make sure to click on that link and join us, and I will see you on EpochTV.com.